So, all right. So we're here on Well Talk. I am here with Dr. Carlos Garcia. Super excited to have him join in on this special episode. Carlos, welcome. Thanks so much for taking this time to be on here. Appreciate it. And if you'd like to introduce yourself a little bit more to the listeners, that would be awesome.
Absolutely. Well, Matt, first I want to say, man, just thank you for having me on. It's an absolute honor to sit. I'm really excited about our convo today.
Likewise.
I've just been watching some of the work you've been doing, brother. Thank you for being out in the world, leading the conversations and inspiring the way you do, brother. So thank you.
Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
so a little bit about myself. I'm a licensed psychologist in the Tampa, Florida area.
Cool.
Have my own small little practice here. A couple of the therapists that I work for or work with me that do some really impactful work in our community. Prior to becoming a therapist, I was actually a firefighter and a paramedic for about 6 or 7 years
Wow.
in my past life, as I say.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So it was really rewarding work. I had a real passion for doing that. And then after doing it for a while, I kind of just had this dream in my heart to go out and be a speaker and inspire and move people. And so that's kind of the direction I'm heading in now. Prior to doing that, I actually served in the United States Marine Corps for about 8 years. Um,
Wow.
yeah. And
Yeah,
so
thank you.
that,
And I said this, yeah, I said this before, and I don't want to interrupt, but I wanted to say thank you so much for your service.
appreciate it, man.
That,
Yeah.
yeah,
Lot,
that's
lot of,
huge.
yeah, lot of people out there just I'll share a little bit about some of the work I'm doing here in a little bit, but I'm just moved, man, by how many people serve our country and just the kind of work that they do to
Yeah,
to keep us safe and give us the opportunity to have conversations like this. So
so true, right? Yeah,
absolutely, so we gotta honor them.
yeah.
Yeah, man. And before the military, I joined the military like 2 weeks after graduating high school. So I grew up in Miami. Had a
Nice.
blast down there. For anyone that's from Miami, got
Yeah, shout
a
out Miami,
lot.
right?
Yeah, shout out to the
Yeah.
305. Uh,
305.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Got in a lot of trouble when I was younger, growing up in a big city like that.
Uh-huh.
But it was all good, man. And originally, I come from Cuba, man. So my family
Yeah.
moved to the United States and to Miami, escaping political, the communism and
Yeah.
what was going on with Fidel Castro, and trying to bring my family here to the United States to have the freedoms we couldn't have over there.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's first of all, just even that itself. There's so many chapters in this what you just said of
Yeah.
your life that I we could sit and talk probably for hours on each chapter, right? And keep going. But I mean, I'm so glad that first of all, your family came over here. You were able to escape that oppression and just all that was happening over there, and all that you've done just in this time of your life to even where you are now as a psychologist.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
just
man.
so cool.
I'll share a little bit of the connection of how my path kind of unfolded the way it
Yeah,
did.
please.
Um, I think a lot of people, Matt, look at my life and be like, "Man, God, you've done so much. Like how driven you are, and how." But it's actually less a product of some vision I had for how my life was going to turn out. I always tell people like, this is the complete opposite of what I thought was going to happen.
Yeah.
So it's been an experience of constantly adapting
Yeah.
and being flexible to what life has given me. Um, but even like joining the Marine Corps, I thought I was going to graduate high school and maybe go to college a little bit, become a police officer like my brother. Uh,
Mm.
Shout out to cops and first
Yeah,
responders there as
the
well.
first responders that have
Yeah,
done so much. Yeah.
totally,
So
totally.
undo so much. And yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
But I'll be honest, when I was getting ready to graduate high school, I didn't think I was college material. I know you talk a
Mm.
lot about mindset, and
Yeah.
that was my mindset at the time, man. I was like, no, man, I come from an immigrant family. Like,
Mhm.
going to a big college, like that's not my thing. I grew up in a house where, my parents were busting their butts just to put food on the table, right?
Yeah.
And so, they didn't have the sort of energy or the time to guide me in school probably the way I needed.
Mm.
And so here I was getting ready to graduate high school. And while most of my friends were going off to college and wanting to become doctors and lawyers, my mindset was like, why don't I go to community college maybe? And I was like, well, what's something that I can do that can feel very rewarding, that can go on my resume and make me feel like I've done something in the world. The other
Mhm.
part of it too, Matt, was I wanted to pay back the country for having given my family the freedom that it did. So that was
Mhm.
my decision to sort of go into the military there.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And then coming out of the military, it didn't. It just I needed to do something that was still kind of high speed, like the idea of coming out of the Marines and then sitting behind a desk,
yeah,
a cubicle somewhere. Just like I couldn't think about doing
I hear
something
you.
like that. And I had a buddy that was getting ready to get into the fire department, and so again, this was another instance where I kind of felt lost in life. I didn't know, what I was going to do, and firefighting sort of came my way, and I was really good at it, and got through the fire academy, paramedic school after that. I think the sort of thread across all of these things, man, has just been my deep passion for helping other people through
Mm,
through.
yeah, you could see, yeah, seeing that for sure. Yeah, that is,
So
yeah, that to me, just I want to say, I want to highlight that and say you can see, even as you say it, the passion and compassion that you have for others and to help others, that passion there that drives that. And as you served in the military and then you went to being a firefighter and a paramedic there as well. And then taking all of that, I'd imagine you saw a lot of things that were probably very intense and stressful, and you do that, and now, wow, like translating that into what you do now.
yeah, well, here was the big shift, man. After um, you know, not just the work that I did, in the military and as a fireman, but even in my own upbringing, man. So what happened for me was I struggled with depression and anxiety for a lot of years,
Mm,
and you know, we can talk about just the continued stigma that we still have around mental health. I think we're doing so much of a greater job than we
yeah,
did even 10 years ago, right?
for
But
sure.
there's still a lot of shame around it. And so for a lot of years I struggled internally, man, with just depression, anxiety, PTSD, and I wasn't getting help, right? Because I felt like that was weak and men don't do that and all of this stuff. And these were cultures that really emphasize this message that like you just suck it up and keep moving forward. And so that's what I was trying to do.
Yeah.
And so on the outside, I tell people like on the outside, my life looked like I had it together, right? I had these amazing jobs. I was called a hero at times, and I
Yeah.
was single, I was dating, I was fit, but like, man, on the inside, I was falling apart every day, and I didn't know where to turn. And so, I think after suffering for so many years, I eventually decided to go to therapy.
Mhm.
And I was like, you know, I wasn't probably as open to it as I was later on, but I think with some time, I started to see how getting in tune with my emotions, getting in tune with my mind, understanding my story, understanding the struggles that I had as a child, in the military, as a paramedic and fireman, like helped me realize, like, oh wow, like you've been bottling your emotions up your whole life, man. Like, of course you're struggling, right?
Wow. Yeah.
And so I had some really beautiful therapists along the way that helped me like shift my life entirely, man, and allowed me to start showing up in a much more beautiful way. And I was like, if I can do this for just one other soul, like that's what I'm supposed to do, man. So I left the fire department,
Mhm.
went back to school, got into a doctorate program, and like that was just the goal. Like I don't care if it takes me till I'm 60 to get this doctorate degree and do this work. Like this
Yeah.
is what I'm meant to do,
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the how the story came together.
That is so inspiring and cool to hear
Thank you, brother.
because everything led up to this, and that this journey that you're on, and you're still doing this work that is still going to blossom obviously and continue to expand, but just seeing that and hearing you talk about that is so cool. And I think a lot of times people who are on the other side of that chair and are in therapy, they end up seeing, I want to help people that are doing this same work that I've done. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I feel like those types of people make some of the best therapists as well.
Totally, man. Even in looking at some of the therapists that I hire here at my practice, like
Mhm.
inevitably at some point the discussion will arise about, what's the work you've done on yourself,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because um, we talk about change. Like one of the funny things, like I see you're on social media a lot, and
Yeah.
inevitably sort of we find like a lot of talk on social media about like what are you doing to change your life, to become more successful, to work on yourself and all of that.
Yeah.
I tell people, man, like I've been working on myself probably, since I was like 18 when I first picked up a book on anger because I was a deeply angry young man,
Mm.
right? And that led me to understanding depression, and that led me to therapy, and that led me to, right, all of the ways that I worked on myself. And so I tell people like I have the desire to want to change
Yeah.
aspects of myself. I have the conscious awareness about the places in me that need to change.
Yeah.
I have the motivation to want to change, the intention to want to change.
Mhm.
And there are still parts of me that are really hard to change. Right? Like
Yeah.
patience, man. It's something I have to
Yeah.
work on like every single day because it's, when you grow up in a house where there was a lot of anger, right? And
Mm.
just a lot of like intense emotions, learning how to navigate emotions is not modeled for you. It's hard, right?
Yeah.
So it's like it's an area in me that I'm still working on. So going back to what you were saying, like when I sit in front of a client who's like struggling with something in their life,
Mm.
their identity, some behavior, some kind of way of thinking that they're trying to change, I get it.
Yeah.
Like I can go into the place within myself that struggles and suffers around trying to become a better human being. And so
Yeah.
instead of trying to become a coach and be like, well, here's what you do, it's like you soften, you go into your place of empathy and compassion and be like, man, I hear you. Like I
Right.
hear how like what's this feel like for you to
Yeah.
feel so stuck in life sometimes, right? And
Mhm.
I think sometimes when we give people some space, some compassion, and some kindness around the things that they're trying to change and evolve in their own lives, it creates a very different environment than, being like, well, this is what you need to do, or why haven't you done it yet, or
Yeah.
why aren't you getting there faster, right?
Mhm. Totally. Yeah. I couldn't put it better in words than what you just said, and there's so much to unpack there. I think even saying like my story is kind of similar in that I started going to therapy around when I was like 19 years old.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it was more for anxiety. I
yeah.
was having panic attacks and things like that. And that kind of led to feeling really down and just discouraged and trying to figure out
Yeah,
like what's going on, right? And this
totally.
was so I'm 34, so this was what 15 years ago. So that was, mental health was people talked but not what we do now, right?
Totally.
And I feel like that led up to me saying
Yeah.
I want to learn more about this. I want to study psychology. And I started to do that and focused in on that, right? And when I'm saying this, I'm also wanting to show that being in that chair. And then when I got to grad school, we had to do at least 30 sessions of personal therapy that got signed off, right? So that was the icing on the cake. So I had already done therapy, but then
Right, right.
and I feel like that just helped me so much more to be able to be ready to help people and
Totally,
and
man.
be in that seat
Yeah.
across from the other seat to say like I might not know exactly how you feel, but I've been in a position that's similar.
Right,
You
right.
know?
Yeah. And just sort of tapping into that human connection piece, right?
Yeah.
Like, if we compared stories, Matt, probably chances are, like there's so much difference in the lives that we've lived, but I
Mhm.
bet you that there are places where we can tap into, hey, like, do you know what struggle's like?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what
Yeah.
struggle. You know what pain
Mhm.
is like?
Yeah.
Yeah, man, I
Yeah.
can tell you some stories of pain in my life, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think like that's what makes a really good therapist is that person that's really able to connect within the place in themselves that knows what struggle is all about, right?
Yeah.
Because it softens our expectations of where other people should be.
Definitely.
Because until you've walked a day, not just a day, but like the entirety of someone's life in their shoes, you can't have assumptions about where they should be or not be, right?
Right. Yeah.
And that kind of level of empathy and compassion is I think sometimes hard to find in this world, because all we do is show up with judgment and expectations about how people should be in the world. And
Yeah.
I tell this to people all the time, like, man, I've grown so much from the clients that I've worked with over the years, because I get like a front seat to the tapestry of their life,
Mhm.
right? The good, the bad, the harsh, the beautiful.
Yeah.
It's a constant reminder to me, um, that like, people are where they are for a reason.
Mhm.
Like, who am I to have judgment about how you interpret your life, or where you find yourself stuck in your life?
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't know, man. I haven't been to the schools you've been to. I didn't have the parents you had, but I
Yeah.
know how all of those things impacted me,
Right.
right?
Yeah. And that's why having discussions like this to
Yeah.
talk and also kind of model how you can do that, as well as, here we go right now. Let's just call out the obvious. You got two Latino males who are clinicians that do work that is similar in two different states, and so much in common, and so much that I'm sure we could still probably say, like, oh yeah, that, and you did, oh yeah. And but you know your story better than I do. I know my story better than me. And so when we're doing therapy, when we're working with people, it's so important to help say, look, I'm in this space with you to walk alongside,
Yes, sir.
you know?
Yes, sir.
And there's so much to unravel with. We just finished June, which was Men's Mental Health
Yeah.
Awareness Month. So many things going on with, you even said it yourself, you just bottled up feelings for so long.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
I kind of want to ask you too, like, for like men, or even, women too, that have had times where they've bottled up feelings and stuff. What do you suggest?
Yeah.
How do you even, where do you start
Yeah.
when something
Absolutely.
like that is, somebody's like, I've never talked about feelings before,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, brother. I'll share a quick story, man, that will segue beautifully into answering your question. This was early on in my career as a fireman, and I was still in EMT school before paramedic school. And I
Hmm.
remember going to class one day, um, and I realized that I was low on gas, so I had to pull into a gas station. And so I pull over into the gas station. I go reach for my wallet, and I realize I left my wallet at home.
Hmm.
And the thing I uttered outwardly, I must have been in my early 20s, was like, "You effing idiot. What the
Hmm.
hell is wrong with you? Get together."
Hmm.
Now, Matt, I had talked to myself at that point that way a million times,
Hmm.
probably multiple times a day. But something about that moment triggered me, was like, wow, like, dude, like, why so violent?
That's harsh, right?
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like, why so violent? And it was like, I don't know, have you ever left anything at home?
Yes.
Probably if we ask that question to your audience, most people would be like, yeah, all the time.
Right.
And I was like, where
Yeah.
did that harshness come from? And I don't know why that stuck with me in such a powerful way, but I started to reflect on that day. Like, why was my internal dialogue, or my internal monologue, always so harsh and so critical? Like,
Mm.
why was I always lashing out at myself in such a harsh way?
Mm.
Well, this is what started the unfolding, the learning,
Mm.
right? I happened to get a book because I wanted to understand my anger. I was always angry. Things were constantly pissing me off.
Mm.
Um, Road rage, like, if I drank too much, I would, the emotions would get out of control.
Yeah.
In my relationships, sometimes I couldn't hold my tongue when I probably needed to. I
Mm.
wasn't very patient, like all
Mm.
of these different ways in which this anger was showing up.
Yeah.
Start to read about anger, it started to tap me into, like, oh, maybe there's some depression there, which is what led me to a therapist, which is what led me to understand, like, oh, Carlos, you grew up in a home with parents, nothing against them, but they didn't have modeled for them how to navigate difficult emotions,
Mhm.
right? How to navigate sadness, how to navigate shame. So
Yeah.
the ways that they showed how to communicate was through anger.
Mm,
If that's what you grew up around your whole life, right? And I grew up with a very angry father, and like, um, let me just frame it this way: like most Hispanic fathers,
mm,
that's how they disciplined, right? If you go back a generation or two, like if you spilled water at the dinner table at my house, you caught a smack across the face and like, hey, idiot, pay attention.
wow.
Look at what you're doing.
Mm,
Now, my dad, that's how he was raised, right? Nothing wrong with that.
yeah.
And as a matter of fact, I remember sharing that story with one of my first early therapists, and the therapist said to me, she's like, wow, you had a really traumatic childhood.
Hmm.
Matt, I laughed at her.
I know. I was gonna say. I'm sure you were probably like, "What?
I was
No."
like,
Yeah.
what do you mean
Wow.
traumatic? That
Yeah.
was like, that's how my brother was raised. That's how I was raised. That's just a Hispanic household.
Mm,
But what I came to understand later, Matt, was that essentially not a lot of emotions were tolerated in my household.
mm,
So as a child, when I should have been learning how to navigate, understand my emotions, understand what to do with them in a healthy way, that wasn't one, it wasn't modeled for me. And two, when I had those emotions, I was reprimanded for it, or chastised, or punished, or told to go to my room, or spanked,
mm,
which is a very strong message of like, this is not okay.
yeah.
So unconsciously,
Wow.
I was like, oh, this version of me is not okay to show up in the world.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
Now,
Yeah.
the other thing too is like, you said this earlier, like, I think the thing that's been a thread for me throughout my life of wanting to serve others has been my compassion.
Mm,
I have a lot of empathy, man. That's how I show up in the world. So
mm,
I was a really sensitive kid. I can tap into how other people were feeling. I can tap into emotions, right? Like if one of my parents looked at me kind of the wrong way, it like it hurt. It was this
mm,
feeling of, oh my God, I'm letting down the people that love me.
yeah.
So here I had gone all this time during my childhood not expressing, these negative emotions.
Right.
2 weeks after high school, I go into the Marine Corps. You know how the military,
Yeah.
you know what the mindset is
Wow.
there.
Right. Yeah.
And then shortly thereafter, I went into another culture that said emotions are not okay.
Yeah.
So of course I was depressed and anxious, man. I'd been bottling things up my whole damn life,
Mm,
not knowing like even how to identify certain of my emotions, and definitely not knowing how to express them.
yeah.
Right? And so the reason that story is important is because, yeah, so maybe the Hispanic culture, but a lot of Caribbean cultures are this way, Asian culture. Like there's a lot of cultures and a lot of houses, not just because of the culture, but sometimes because of the generation, right? Like we have
Mm,
to think about how our parents grew up and their parents grew up.
right.
So, like, a lot of us didn't really get the opportunity as kids to understand how to deal with negative emotions. To me, they're not negative. To me, like, sadness is going to arise in your life, shame
Right.
is going to arise in your life. At some
Right.
point, someone's going to let you down, someone's going to stab you in the back. Like, why don't we teach our kids what those emotions are all about, how to handle them, so they're not boxing all of that stuff up their whole lives, and then it's coming out sideways in the ways that they talk to themselves, in their
Exactly.
relationships, in their
Hmm.
work.
Yeah. That internal dialogue that they would have with themselves, right? And that.
Yeah,
Thanks so much for sharing all of that because I think that brings really good insight to people that have maybe struggled or are maybe struggling right now that they're still trying to figure out like what's gone on, why am I so resentful, why am I so
yeah,
bitter or angry inside?
yeah,
And I think it's so it's so awesome that you were able to identify it and then do the work and be free from that. And I think, like you said, your parents, they were doing what they knew to do. And I often tell people too, I'm like, parents usually parent in the best way that they know how.
right.
And if they find something else out now, like a new way, then it's like, okay, maybe I could try this, right? But sometimes it's hard because there's like, no, this is how we do this.
Sure.
And I often share my story of just like even with my dad had been abandoned by his father, never knew his biological dad, but he broke the cycle and was there for my brother and I. And my brother and I are beyond, we're like, my dad is one of my best friends. And that was huge for me. Not everybody gets that. But my gratefulness too has been, Pop, thanks for giving me what you didn't have.
Dude,
You know
and
what I
I
mean?
think, yeah, like that's beautiful because I think that's the work that's out there for all of us, right? Like
Right.
I will say too, because oftentimes we talk about this and people will think about, maybe their childhood or their parents and be like, well, there might be strong resent and anger. And there was for me for a lot of years. It was
Yeah.
like, hey, man, why couldn't these adults get together
Mm,
to be there for me in the way I needed to be parented, right? To
mm,
be available.
mm,
I think once I was able through therapy to move out of that anger and out of that resent, what I found on the other side was compassion, right? Like, yeah, my father had a father that was much harsher than he was.
yeah.
My father lost his twin brother when he was 16 years old.
Mm,
My father, had his life set for him. And when he was in his, late 20s, had to come to a new country, find a new job, like deal with stress that I'm never going to know because he dealt with it.
right.
My mom, lost her father when she was 8 years old. Like he kind of she felt abandoned by him. Like,
Mm,
so like I learned to have compassion for the things my parents went through and their
right.
parents before them,
Uh-huh.
right? And so like the doing the inner work is so that we can, you know, be of service to our kids or to the people that we serve later on. Because now I have a 2 year old,
Mm,
right? And man, like all of the work that I've done, as hard as it's been, all of the change that I've indoctrinated in my life, all of the anger I've let go of, all of the resent, like I will go down that road a million times over to be the kind of father that I can be to this little boy now, who doesn't have to come to a house where there's people screaming, who doesn't have to deal with my impatience, who doesn't, right? And so, like, this idea of like the work that we do on ourselves is to serve others,
right.
right? Like, we heal for the service of society and the people in it, brother.
Yeah. Wow. It's so impacting because not only did you say changing up that cycle as well and giving your son something different, but also just the way you said it, the empathy behind it, the passion and compassion to say, my son is going to experience something different. You know what I mean? And be different because I'm going to model this for him.
Right.
And I admire that so much. It also is hitting me because I have a soon to be 2-year old in August. So so yeah, my wife and I have a son and he is we're right into those terrific twos going into that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I
yeah.
want to share a story with you, man. Matt, my wife is also a therapist. She's a marriage and family therapist.
Okay.
So,
Awesome. My wife's
yeah.
my wife's a school counselor. So
Oh, I love it. I
yeah.
love it. So I imagine
So
the kinds of conversations that go on at home,
yeah,
right?
so we always have, yeah. Oh, that's so cool.
And she was in therapy for many years as well too. So I think when we were getting ready to become parents, there was this intentionality about like how do we want to show up, right?
Mm,
What are the places in ourselves that we might need to continue to work on to provide this child coming into the world with a different space than we had. And
yeah,
you know the work that we do as therapists can be really challenging sometimes, man, just hearing sort of the suffering in the world and things that people deal with.
yeah,
And I've really evolved in my ability to show emotions now. Like that's from the place from which I lead, is like emotions, right?
right.
And probably like 6 or 7 months ago, I came home and I was just having a hard day, man. I felt like as a business owner, things just felt tough. I'd had a day of just really tough client sessions. And so I was feeling
Mm,
heaviness. My dad was dying at the time. He's since passed, but dealing with dementia. And so, man, my heart was just feeling really heavy.
so sorry to hear that.
Yeah, thanks, brother. I appreciate that. And one of the things that I've learned in life is that when my heart is feeling heavy, I need to give it the space to feel.
Mm,
And so I noticed on my drive home that I was just like bottling up. I didn't really want to go there for, just old behaviors, right? But my wife has this beautiful way of just asking a question sometimes that's like, when someone asks like, "How are you?" and then they're like, "Yeah, but how are you?"
Yeah.
And I got home mad, and my wife was like, "You seem heavy. How's your heart?"
Mm,
And that was my cue, right? I just started crying, brother. I was just like, you know what? Like it's a hard day. I'm feeling heavy. God, there's just like so much suffering in the world, and I was just like, give yourself this moment, man. So I just sat and I started crying, and I was just like feeling sadness, man, feeling the
yeah.
heavy, the heavy. And my son sort of was watching me cry and kind of like looking because he was like, he doesn't, he wasn't sort of knowing what was happening.
Hmm.
And my wife picked him up and she sat him on my lap.
Mm,
And he reached out his hands and he was sort of like, wiping away the tears. And she said to him, "This is daddy having big emotions.
mm,
This is what it looks like, and it's okay to have them."
mm,
And brother, that was the moment.
yeah.
That was the moment that validated all of the hard work, that validated the dark places that I had to go within myself at times, the struggle, the overcoming, the challenges, the emotional stuff, all of it, to realize like, oh, this is healing. This kid is not going to walk around having feelings of shame when he's sad.
Right. Wow.
That's not something we're going to teach in this house.
Right. Yeah.
And that was a really powerful moment, man, that I think it's just a testament to like where we can get regardless of what's happened to us in life, the kind of healing that we can do to start living from a place of love, compassion, joy, and freedom.
That touches me so much to hear every response, the whole way that that was handled, and just being able to have that space and being able to feel, and giving yourself time to feel is so important. It's we're human beings. We feel, we're emotional beings, and I just I hear so much out of that, that I know that listeners will be impacted by that as well, and parents and dads, and you know it just it brought up a similar story that was something very similar that happened, where I had a childhood friend that was killed,
Mm,
and we had found out through some friends that brought it up from, they were close to his mom, and a similar thing. I broke down. I was at home, and my son sees me crying because I'm like bawling and my eyes out,
yes.
and he comes because he doesn't really know what to do.
Yeah.
He's looking at me, and then he comes, and my wife. It's so beautiful because she did something exactly the same, where she says, "Daddy's just got a lot of emotions right now," and it was like a, so you saying all that just, wow, confirms and affirms all of this. I'm just sitting here like, to the listeners,
Yeah.
it's okay to feel. It's okay to be there
Yeah.
for people even when you don't have words, just
Right.
being present, right?
It's part of our human condition, brother. Like, the thing now that where I'm seeing a lot of my work take place is, I've felt called to go back into the environments that sold me on the message that emotions were weak and share a different message. Because that's what most people think, is that like feeling is weak.
Right.
Um, but I've never felt more resilient and tougher in my life.
Mm,
So now I know how to handle everything out there.
yeah.
Now I know how to handle everything in here too.
Hmm.
And
Which
so now
makes you
it's
so
it's
much
not in
more. Yeah.
control. I'm in control.
Yeah.
So, now the places I go and speak is first responders, cops,
Uh,
firemen,
uh,
military people. Like just
yeah.
last week, I was doing a workshop, and it was funny, man. It's just like all of these, elite force military folks, just top notch warriors, man. These people are
Yeah.
What I'm in there talking about is like, cool, man, continue to be those warriors out
Right.
there. But
Right.
how do you become the warrior of in here?
Mm-hmm.
Right? How do you start working with the mindset and the heart
Mm-hmm.
so that this stuff isn't catching you by surprise and leading you in your life? You're leading it,
Yeah.
right? And I also do it with business owners, so as entrepreneurs, that's another thing we wear as a badge of honor, to just kind of keep going. But there's a
Right.
different way to do it, man. There's a different way, and I've been living that for the last handful of years. I've never had so much joy. I've never felt so resilient. I've never felt lighter. I've never had more
Mm.
freedom. So, my message now is to go back into those places and share a different way of navigating, the emotional and psychological stuff.
So beautiful to hear that, and going, like you said, going to the elite of the elite. I mean, these guys are trained machines. They're like a machine, right? You run on like, all right, boom, let's go. And I mean, I love watching even documentaries and stuff of like Navy SEALs and Green
Yeah.
Berets and stuff. And so it's really so cool to hear that you do that, and that you go and you help, and even police officers and what they do, and all of these first responders. And then just the compassion and passion that you have to do that. I wow. I mean, I love it. It's so cool. It just gets me excited to know that there are individuals like yourself out there that are trying to make this place that we live in a better place, and help
Absolutely.
people in this, and navigate. And
Yeah.
even thinking about you saying that, you have these guys that they're just, I'm sure, probably looking like, all right, we're talking about feelings today. You know what I mean? I can just picture, because I've been in situations like that too, where it's like, yes, we are talking about feelings
Right.
today.
Right.
Right. And
Well,
that's,
I
yeah.
think that, Matt, it's yeah, yeah. You just learn to speak the language that people can hear, brother.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
what it is, right?
That's
We
so
don't,
good.
you don't go in there and be like, all right, we're going to talk about feelings.
Right.
No, but you talk about the struggle. You
Right.
talk about your life. You
Yeah.
lead from example. You lead from, like, look, this is what my life looked like when I wasn't doing this well.
Yeah.
You want to do that? Keep doing that. You can have it. I mean, I'm not going to take it from you.
Right.
I invite you to have some curiosity about what it might look like when it's different.
Yeah.
Here's an example of what it looks like when it's different. You choose,
For
right?
sure.
And you
Yeah.
just give people the autonomy to figure it out, right? Because eventually, like, we don't want to struggle. No
Yeah.
one came here to struggle. We came here to live lives of, like you said, compassion and passion and serving others and doing good in the world. So why wouldn't you want that tool, which is us, to be in its optimal state?
Yeah.
Right? To do that work, to serve
Exactly.
at the best of your capacity. So
Yeah.
that's why I really appreciate the work that you do too, man. You're out there telling your story and having these conversations, and like, that's where it starts, brother.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, the the position that I hold is, I work with, specifically with high schoolers.
Beautiful.
I'm a wellness director,
Yeah,
and
love
I
it.
work with high schoolers, so I have to adjust my my tone. So when you
Yeah,
like,
that's a tough audience.
yeah, when you're like, we don't go
That's a
in
tough
there and say
audience.
we're gonna talk about feelings.
Right.
It's like I have to try and be like, all right, guys. So what's
Yeah,
up? How's everybody doing today? You know what I mean?
exactly.
And and so I've had the opportunity to work with adults and kids as well. I mean, young little ones like
Yeah.
4 or 5. The high schoolers, man, this population of
Tough,
people.
tough.
Yeah, it's tough, and that's my primary job. My other, obviously, is the Worthwell, the business that I
Yeah,
have, that
yeah,
I do, where it's lifestyle, and the brand and all of that.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I'm just thinking about you saying that too, and it's like, yeah, how we have to, we say it in a way they'll understand. That is so huge, because some people, and this is what is really true, not everybody can adapt and adjust to their audience and read their clients or the audience that they're speaking to, and they go in with this one fixed mindset of, this is how I'm going to deliver it. But if you have people that are like, No. Then you have to, okay, we got to switch it up really quick because now I'm gonna have to figure out how to get to you. How am I gonna connect, right? And when you can do that on the fly, when you can do that, like, okay, got it. You get used to it, then you can win and captivate those clients or that audience. Even the toughest ones, right? You know? That's so cool, so huge too, to know how and when to talk and say, this is
Yeah,
what, yeah,
yeah.
so good.
Yeah, it's almost inspiring, man. Like the less you want to hear my message, the more I want to talk to you.
Right? You want to break
Yeah,
down the
yeah,
barrier.
yeah, yeah,
That's so true.
yeah,
Yeah, I hear you.
yeah.
And I'm thinking too, like, even in all of this and what you do, like, man, what do you do to take care of yourself too outside of even therapy? And like what's self-care look like for you?
Absolutely, man. Great question. Yeah, man. I think the first thing really was really teaching myself how to be okay with feeling my emotions when they arise,
Mm,
whether it's fear, sadness, grief, whatever it is, just processing through the emotion, getting it out of me. But I have an amazing support system, man. I have, a family that I can reach out to anytime I need to. I got an amazing group of friends just from like these different times in my life. My partner is just, I mean, she's a godsend. Like she can tap into things within myself even before I see them, right? I'm
right.
sure you can relate, right?
Yeah. You're
So
like,
she'll be
no,
like,
that's
"Hey,
not
how
working.
are you? Oh,
Like,
everything's cool. No,
yeah,
really, how are you? Let me check."
yeah.
Right?
No, that's not it. It's fine.
Yeah,
Everything. You're like,
yeah,
no, it's
exactly, exactly.
not. Yeah.
But in addition to that, yeah, I got an amazing meditation practice. Yoga is
Cool.
something I like to engage in as well to get
Awesome.
myself grounded in my body.
Yeah,
Yeah, trying to get out in nature.
definitely.
Setting good boundaries around time off.
Yeah,
At the end of
that's
the
true
day and
too.
the
Yeah.
weekends and stuff. And
Yeah.
then my son, man, my son is just, he's a constant reminder of like all of the beauty of life. And if I'm ever caught up in who I am as a business owner or a speaker or a therapist, I just remember I'm just a dad, man, and all I have to do is make the world safe for this young man. And so
Yeah.
that's a really, really grounding practice for me.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's I love the arsenal of tools because that's what I usually tell people too. I'm like,
Yeah.
you gotta have a bunch of different stuff.
Got to.
Because
You got to.
sometimes what worked one day didn't work, isn't gonna
Yeah.
work this next day. It's like I say to people sometimes, like, hey, you might have your favorite meal, right? If you could think of that one thing that you love, you're like, oh, I could eat that. If you ate that every day, on and on and on and on, same
Exactly.
time,
Yeah.
same, it would be like, okay, this doesn't taste as good anymore,
Right.
right?
I'm
That's how
bored with
I
it. Yeah. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
how I tell people that's what self-care is like. It's like
Exactly.
sometimes you gotta switch it up.
Gotta change it
you,
out.
you
Yeah,
know?
because sometimes like just mindfulness, right? Like
Yeah.
sometimes just on the ride home, man, it might be just shutting off the music, putting my hand over my heart, and just checking in with like,
Yeah.
where am I? Where's my head at? What do I need to clear? What do I need to let out?
Yeah.
And just being really in tune to my headspace and my mind and my body and seeing what they need, man.
For sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. No,
yeah,
thanks for sharing those things too, because I feel like that's something that people need to hear different types of self-care. Like it doesn't have to be one type of thing, you
totally,
know? And
totally.
and Carlos, I do want to be respectful of your time, but I also want to say, do you have anything that you'd like to just share for listeners, viewers as well? Advice or just a suggestion, and then I also want to get you to share about your Instagram, your business and stuff too and all that. But
Yeah.
anything that you'd like to conclude with and yeah.
Yeah, man. I'd say like where you are at is absolutely perfect.
Mm,
We live in a world that's constantly right, like this constant comparison. We're constantly trying to achieve and become and do and strive into the next thing. And
yeah,
I think sometimes that keeps us in this state of constantly needing more or wanting more or
right.
thinking like we're not enough. Like
Yeah.
you're enough right where you're at.
Mm,
And if it doesn't feel like that, like just bring a little bit of curiosity into your life and see what can change, right?
yeah.
Like start where you are. Maybe it's not therapy, maybe it's a book, maybe it's a yoga class, maybe it's
Mm,
a song, like whatever that's going to trigger you to see what change you need to make in your life. And just keep reminding yourself, like, you're a human that came into this world with compassion and joy, and like that's instilled in us. We just got to strip away all the wiring and old stuff that's keeping us feeling like we're not that.
Right, for sure. No, thank you. I That's great advice, great input, so great insights. Yeah, definitely. If you can share your Instagram, what if you have a website or anything, and about the business, the therapy that you do, all that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So, yeah, anybody, we're in Tampa, so our practice here is Tampa Counseling and Wellness. We have therapists here that can work with people now with the PsyPact Act in up to 42 states. So we do
Cool.
virtual sessions as well. And if people want to follow me on Instagram, it's Dr. Carlos A. Garcia. And pretty soon, I'm going to have a new website out that's more for some of my consulting and speaking. And so, probably in about a month or so, people can find me at drcarlos.com. I got a book that's coming out that's
Nice.
essentially an invitation for corporate America to go to therapy and do their inner work.
I
So
love it.
that'll be out in about a month or so, and people will be able to sort of pick that up and just kind of get my take into how to do that inner work, where to start.
That's so cool too, because that's a whole other topic as well. You talk about entrepreneurs and people that are
Yeah,
doing so much, trying to just work, 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 and make this business of theirs happen. And but then they're not taking care of themselves.
totally.
And wow, well, I can't. First of all, I can't wait to get that book and read it, and that's gonna be awesome.
Send you a copy,
But
brother.
yeah, for sure. And in regards to you being on the show today, I appreciate it so much. All the way from Tampa, we're touching down in different states, so Worthwell's
Awesome,
coming
man.
out and branching into different areas and venues and collaborations. So I'm excited about the future. And yeah, for those listening, stay tuned. We'll be back next week again. And I'm pretty sure Carlos and I are going to have some more meetings on here and stuff as well. The vibe was just really cool. And this is a cool guy. So, cool cat
Appreciate
right
it.
here. So, thank you all for listening. And I'll talk to y'all next week.